yeah, do grab mats and cushions and everything you need, and do fill up a bit from the front. It really helps. That really helps me if you're not all spread out through the room. Yeah. So just filling gaps where you see them, and yeah, moving forward, moving down. This strange phenomenon where there always seems to be more people when we're in this room than there were when we were in the room next door. It's like you multiply on the way in. Great, so everyone have what they need, so grab as many cushions, as many cushions as you need. Mats, like those chairs at the back, you know the deal. Okay, and then when you've got what you need, we'll start by you can get people to move up a little bit if you need to make a bit of space. Great, so as usual with this class, we'll start by saluting the shrine. So we'll stand and we'll do that in call and response, and you can repeat what I say if you wish. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Namah. Namo Namah. Om. Hum. Okay, so a warm welcome also if you're joining us on YouTube, either right now or in the future. Otherwise, what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to pick up a series that we sort of come in and out of. And the next few weeks, I think, we're going to be in this series, which is a series of that we call Sangharakshita Classics. So Sangharakshita, who I might call Bhante, which means something like revered teacher, is the founder of our Buddhist tradition. In a way, I mean, the main reason that matters is that all of us who have been ordained are in a way are disciples of his. So he's our teacher, and so what you get through us will be coming through him. And what he did. This was the lecture that I'm going to sort of communicate from, which is called Enlightenment as Experience and as Non-Experience, which is a really suitably mysterious title. I think it was given in, I should have looked up the year, but it's, I think, in the late, I think it's in the early 70s or late 1960s, in a period in which he was giving a lot of talks and really using that as a medium to kind of communicate the ideas of the Buddhist tradition in a way fresh to meet a new context, a new culture. And we're still sort of living that out, and these ideas, that some of which are packed into these very sort of rich lectures, are sort of still kind of percolate through everything that we communicate. So I'll be talking about this. I really love this lecture, so that's why I picked it. I was saying to someone I need to write a talk before dinner, not only before dinner, but before dinner, and I thought actually Bhante wrote a talk about 50 years ago, and I'm just sort of I'll be trying to communicate that somewhat fresh for our current context. Actually, it's worth just saying on Thursday it's the anniversary. It will be 7 years since he died, and there's going to be an event here on Thursday, and Paramatta, who was probably his closest friend especially in the latter years of his life, will be here and just talking about him, which in a way is what I'd really recommend. Actually, he's great, Paramatta. He's very likeable man, and I knew Bhante very, very, very well, very personally. So I'd recommend coming to that. Anyway, what we'll do now is we'll start with some meditation. So we'll do a period of the mindfulness of breathing. Maybe just a quick show of hands. Is anybody here who's not been taught the mindfulness of breathing here in the practice in 4 stages? It's fine if that's the case. Just show a hand, just so I know. Yeah. Okay. Great. So I'll sort of say what we'll be doing as we do it. It's very simple. Basically, we're just paying attention to the breath, and there's a few particular ways in which we do that. So I'll say them as we do it. And the main thing I'm going to suggest is that for all of us, is that we see if we can relate. This is on theme for the evening. See if we can pay attention to the experience of the breath, the experience of how we are right now in total, the experience of what it's like to be alive, as an experience directly, therefore, rather than sort of mediated too much through our sort of ideas or our assumptions about our experience. So trying to get as close to what it's actually like. That's something we can all bear in mind as we're doing it. So getting yourself set up for a period of the mindfulness of breathing for about 25 minutes, half an hour. So firstly, just finding a comfortable meditation posture where you can sit nice and upright, but also very relaxed. Paying attention particularly to the sensations of contact with the floor and the seat. So the actual experience of contact, pressure, warmth, whatever that is that signals contact to you. And letting all the weight of your body just rest on that area. This downward motion of gravity being met and supported by the seat and the floor. Letting go of the weight of the body and letting go of your day and preoccupations. particularly as you allow your weight to drop down through the base of the spine. This allows your spine to rise in its natural curves upwards, as though there's a lift from the crown of your head. I like to imagine that being lifted by the crown, this image of a golden thread connecting to the crown of the head that's lifting us up, so that all you need to do is just allow your weight to just drop from there. This is opening up the space of the body, the weight dropping down, rising up through the crown of the head, and awareness filling the whole space in between. Noticing the whole of your experience. Including any resistance to that. Any sort of, anything that's trying to close your experience back down, any tension, any tightness, gripping. Pay attention to that as well. Not trying to push it away, just noticing what that's like, even the discomfort of it. Also the more pleasant aspects of your experience, they're there as well. And through the whole space of the body, noticing all the movement, which we tend to call the breath. We can experience this through the whole body, not just in the chest. And what's that actually like? Mindfulness of breathing. In the first stage, adding a count, so at the end of every out breath, placing a number. So breathe in, breathe out, 1. Breathe in, breathe out, 2. All the way to 10, starting again at 1. placing the count at the beginning of the in-breath. 1, breathe in, breathe out. And as you breathe in again, 2, etc. Now letting go of the counting and just experiencing the whole of the breath in the whole of the body. in the final stage, maintaining a broad awareness of the breath in the body, but finding a point where the breath first enters and leaves the body, perhaps around the tip of the nose, where you can pay attention to a very subtle area of sensation. Now letting go of making any effort to follow the breath, but just sitting still for a moment longer with a broad awareness. Okay. So, yeah, enlightenment as experience and as non-experience. So that's the topic for this evening. So in the lecture, I'm going to follow very closely the structure of Sangharakshita's lecture, and I'd really recommend going online and you can listen to him give it, a recording of him giving it with all the kind of traffic sounds of London 50 years ago and all of that. He starts by pointing out that Buddhism, you could simplify Buddhism down to being a path and a goal. So there's a path, there's all the things that we're doing, that we're following, that we're trying to practice, and that path is going somewhere. It's going towards a goal that we nominally call enlightenment. That's the sort of the coverall term for where we're trying to head. And this goal, the talk's very much focusing on the goal. It's talking about enlightenment itself. And the goal's really important because we need to know if we're going to practice, if we're going to try and move along the path, we need to have a sense of being drawn towards something, of wanting to move towards something. And so we might talk about that goal in a number of different ways. So we might talk about enlightenment in terms of wisdom, in terms of being a clear seeing of how things really are, a sort of knowing quality. We can talk about it in terms of compassion, the sense of as we see things as they are, there's a sort of release from feeling separate from others, and with that, a feeling for them, and particularly a feeling for and a sort of resonance with suffering when we see it. And with that sort of release comes a great deal of energy as well. We're told a sort of almost limitless energy. So enlightenment's often talked about in those three ways, in terms of wisdom and compassion and energy. But he makes the point, often the way we talk about enlightenment is in terms of an experience, in terms of experience, that there is that enlightenment is not it's not an idea that we talk about. It's not a philosophical statement or potential or sort of an abstract idea in that way. It's something that is experienced. It is something that is perceived, that is felt, almost in the blood, in the bones, etc. Something that's lived out, that we can experience directly in that sense. So there's something in that. It takes us away from any more kind of sort of abstract or philosophical sort of engagement with the Buddha Dharma. But then he goes on to spend almost the entire lecture talking about the drawbacks of relating to enlightenment as experience. So maybe just a quick sense from you before we kind of go into all of that, as to what do you think might be some of the potential drawbacks of relating to enlightenment, or the goal of what we're trying to do, the thing that on some level is motivating all of us to be here. What are the downsides of relating to that as an experience? Any thoughts?
Yeah. I think in that way it makes you feel something, isn't it?
Right.
Like, it's like we do in meditation. It's just like I want to feel something. But that itself can be a bit distracting, or take you away from where you meant to get to.
Yeah.
Experience.
End up being preoccupied with wanting to. I'll repeat it for the mic, but ending up being preoccupied with wanting to feel something, wanting to have an experience, to sort of get something. Yeah, great.
Very similar point, kind of the same point, but if you have felt something that you feel is important to you in that way, you keep wanting it, wanting to create it again.
Yeah.
And that becomes a block.
Right.
Experiencing that again or experiencing other things again.
Yeah. So it's like not wanting to repeat an experience. Good. Also, in some ways, if you've had a strong experience, another danger can be that you cling on to that a bit. You try and you sort of you make that something about you. You're the person who's had that experience, and what might that mean about me as well? Yeah, that's not quite what you were saying, but to add that. Any more thoughts? Yeah.
It's too far away.
Right. Yeah. So it's too far away. This experience of enlightenment, if that's what it's all about, having this experience where I'm enlightened, it's so far away that what's the point, right? Yeah, it could be very demotivating to think of to relate to the goal in this thing that because we only get the enlightenment experience at the point of enlightenment. That implies that there's almost nothing in between. Yeah. Good. Yeah, one more. Great.
Maybe the fear of the ego towards an experience that's beyond ego. So this experience of egolessness, the dissolution of the self. The ego is attached to the self, it identifies with the self, and so it's the fear of, as we get maybe closer to that dissolution, is the fear of, it's not annihilation, but it might feel like it for the ego. Because, the fear, the death of it.
Right, if it's all about this experience of, an experience of, say, ego death or something, and you might talk about it, then that could be...
To phrase it, obviously, how the ego projects the fear.
Right.
Because it doesn't really know what's good enough.
Yeah, so especially if what we're aiming towards is a really big experience, we might be afraid of that as well. And also there's this point that kind of, one of the things that Sangharakshita says is that, even the idea that enlightenment as an experience is flawed if you think that it's an experience that you kind of have amongst other experiences. It's as though it's an experience that you don't come out the other side of, if you like. It's saying that because we're used to sort of, I'm here and something happens and I experience it. Or we'd be going beyond that. He said it's something like our sort of enlightenment becomes a sort of continuing part of our life, or that our life becomes a kind of continuing part of enlightenment. It's like if we're going to use the language of experience, we need to extend it in that way beyond the usual sense of me having an experience out there, kind of thing. The main issue, though, that he points out, or the starting point, is that it's not this it seems a very natural way, doesn't it, of relating to it, enlightenment. We sort of we go on retreat, we want to have some meditation, we want to go deeper, we want to see reality, we want to have the experience of wisdom or whatever it is. It seems very natural, but he points out that it's not something that's in the Buddhist tradition. It's particularly not early on. Maybe about 800 years into the Buddhist tradition, there are some words that might start to approximate to something like experience, but even that's a bit of a stretch. It's not really something that's in the tradition. It's something that we can sort of potentially draw out of it, or it's a sort of implication that we might draw out of it later, but it's not sort of there. A bit like this idea of all life is one, for instance. It's like you could. That's an interpretation you could well make of the teaching, but it's not there in the original teaching, and that's what we're trying to sort of to come from. We're trying to come from the tradition. We're trying to come from the experience that the Buddha and his enlightened disciples are trying to communicate to us. We need to sort of work out where does this idea come from? Like, it's part of a sort of modern way of thinking about things, is to think in terms of experience. And he then goes on to talk about the Reformation, the Christian Reformation, in the modern world and in the sort of the West, although what that means sort of gets dissolved more over the decades, doesn't it? But like in this country, for most of us, sort of growing up in a sort of westernized culture, the impact of Christianity and Christian thought it goes very, very deep. It's sort of in the structure of the way that we sort of think as a culture. And he's particularly talking about this moment of the Reformation, some 500 odd years ago, something like that. Again, that's a date that I a minute ago I thought I wish I'd looked that up. But what he's saying is that before that, religion was very much woven into life. You couldn't sort of separate out religion or religious sort of, or what we might later think about as religious experience. We couldn't separate that out from life generally. It was a much richer thing with doctrine, philosophy, ritual, sacrament, liturgy, festivals, pageants, social institutions, folk customs, laws, myth, legend, mysticism, asceticism, even marvel and miracle. So it was like, it was written into kind of all aspects of life to form a complete whole, where life was not separate from the divine, if you like, or something higher, or the pursuit of something of more meaning. It wasn't a separate thing from the rest of our life. Until the point of the Reformation was this moment where it was around the time that science was starting to a scientific worldview was starting to come in and start to give a different basis for understanding things. Particularly, obviously, the theory of evolution was a big one in that, because it was pointing out to us that it was saying things we've evolved over many years from lower forms of life, which goes against the exact word of the Bible. So you sort of couldn't take the religion, the Christian religion, literally in that sense. So the kind of fundamental this is how it is literal understanding was broken in some way. And the arts started to become more, there was more of a sense of the arts could be something secular. You could look at life in itself through a lens other than a religious lens. And there was a general sort of a wedge that came in and sort of separated out life, ordinary life, and the religious. And there was many things that was trying to sort of correct as well in Christianity and in the culture at the time. But you created this split where you've got life and you've got religion. You've got the secular and you've got the divine. And so what you then end up with is what religion then is. Well, what does religion have to offer then if it's separated out from the rest of life? Bhante quotes the poet Matthew Arnold in saying that religion becomes morality tinged with emotion. Morality tinged with emotion. So you've got morality, you've got an ethical framework. That's the thing that's often missing, isn't it? That might be sort of mimicked in laws and in ethical statements and so on. We find our own ways of doing that, but the general sense of there being a kind of moral compass that's tended to sort of remain the kind of domain of religion for a long time it had. Morality tinged with emotion. an emotion, this sense of a feeling, basically. A feeling, a sentiment, an experience. The sort of feeling of something bigger and higher. So you've got the morality and you've got the sort of emotion, the experience, the sentiment. So in a way, that's probably how we've arrived at being able to relate to religious experience of some sort, or spiritual experience, or even something as down to earth as meditation, through the lens of it being an experience, because it's separate from normal life. So it's the bit where I feel something, or the bit where I have a meaningful experience. So, how does this relate to our life, particularly today? And we need to sort of zoom out and think a bit about, like, what is our life like today? And one of the things, this is very similar to what he was saying in the lecture at the time, and that was sort of almost like about 50 years ago. And I think in a way there's things in this that have just intensified since. So he was talking about life being something that's become very complex and confusing. So much of our experience of life is one of sort of bombardment and confusion. And I think that's got more and more the case as we are stimulated by more and more input. It's like our days can be full of input from so many different sources. In the face of which we can feel really powerless, particularly in a world where there's really, really awful things happening all the time that, if we choose to, we can be updated upon, we can be notified and get updates on throughout the day. And what do we do about it? What can we actually do about that? So we feel there's this awfulness, there's lots of it, and what can I do about it? And things are changing very, very fast within that. There's a sense of like the sweep of history is like speeding up, isn't it? And it feels like that at the moment, and particularly with AI at the moment. It's changing things very, very quickly, and things always seem within the course of your months or whatever. It doesn't seem to happen that fast. But you look back just a year or so ago and think we were doing things very differently. We were working very differently, etc. So there's we're sort of powerless in the face of this kind of sweeping change. And within that our life and what we're doing in our life can often feel very monotonous or dull. There can be a real, I'm sure that there's good bits to our life as well within all this, but there's a sort of tendency that I think has become more amplified with this, and we can see it. I think if you look around, particularly in a city like London, you look at people's faces, there's a lot. It's a minority of people that you look at in the street who look like that you could say, they look quite happy, and a lot of us are just finding ourselves in situations where we're kind of just going through the motions of what we kind of thought were expected of us, what our parents thought we should do, or a lot of the time what we just sort of assumed that we would do. And then you get to a certain age and you feel like, is that it? Or I'm not actually enjoying this that much. Your energies just are not that engaged. I meet a lot of people here at the centre who are the main thing, they seem to have, their main focus seems to be work and career. That seems to be the thing that takes up most of their mental space. And most people I meet who talk about their career aren't enjoying it very much, or finding it a burden or a stress. And it's like our energies, our creative energies, get more and more sort of dampened down. We have to sort of force ourselves through that routine that we've got set up for us. And our energies become sort of very frustrated. Within that, we've also got a culture that's becoming increasingly individualistic and therefore impersonal. It's sort of individualistic but also kind of bureaucratic. So our engagement with people and situations and institutions are more and more kind of, tracked, documented, predictable in that way. I met a very distressed young man the other day who I sat and talked to him, and he immediately burst into tears. And he was in a very, very distressed state. But the main thing was he was struggling to get help with various things. But the main thing is no one was just talking to him as a person, which is why he was so. Which is why he burst into tears when I made him a cup of tea. And I think that's obviously an extreme example, but a lot of people, I think, are in a situation where we have a sense that there's a potential for more human connection than we're getting, and we feel kind of starved of that. So in all of that, it's like there's the potential for our life to feel much, much more rich, for our energies to be much more involved, for our sense of connection to be much more involved, for our life to feel much more meaningful. There's the potential for that, and it's frustrated. And so we're left in this situation where we just want to feel something. We want to, we want an experience, because it's not being sort of met. We look outside of ourselves for an experience to sort of capture us in some way, and we end up in this relationship to experience where we're sort of wanting it. We're wanting something to be kind of given to us. Experience is happening all the time. We're always experiencing that. We don't know anything other than that. The issue is that we're alienated from it. The issue is that we're alienated from the kind of richness of the simplicity of our experience. We're sort of overwhelmed by complexity, away from just directly experiencing being alive and all of the sort of the simple and important aspects of that. And so we look outside for that. I found a quote from a book called The Experience Economy, which says that customers now want experiences and they're willing to pay admission for them. That is the sense, isn't it? It's like lots of people say this, and it's not even necessarily bad advice, that it's better to spend your money on experiences than on objects. Well, that's sort of fair enough advice. You might enjoy that a bit more. But there's this sense that we're sort of, like an experience is something that we can hand over hard cash for and be given, or that we kind of deserve in some way. And so the issue with a lot of this is that it's neurotic, in the sense that it can't actually work. It doesn't actually fill the void that we're trying to fill. When you want, if you're it's like opening the fridge late at night, thinking, what am I looking for? An experience to be taken out of, like, there's nothing in particular. I'm not actually particularly hungry. I don't really need anything. But actually I'm trying to fill some sort of inner longing of some sort that's not being met. And so partly what we the part of the issue with looking outside of ourselves is that we become passive. So technology puts us very much in this position. We look for our experience of enjoyment. We look for some richness in our life, and we find it in some very brightly coloured dots on a screen, followed by some other very brightly coloured dots on a screen. And we sort of become passive in relation to our enjoyments. I was just on a solitary retreat recently, and I was trying to remember to shift my attention from what do I need to do now? I should probably meditate so that I can then cook dinner, and then before it gets dark, I can wash up before it gets dark. Things like just that simple enough way of relating to experience. Well, I should probably just do the next thing, and trying to shift out of that into like, what do I actually want to do? Can I trust that where my energy is going, what I actually want to do, because I'm cultivating quite a lot of awareness, I could trust that will take me somewhere, and I'll actually enjoy my experience. And there was a moment where I was like, do you know what? I want a cup of tea. And I was used to having a cup of tea in the evening, and it was the afternoon. And I thought, yes, that is actually what I want to do. And I felt so much better for it, because I was sort of out of touch with this sense of, I was sort of out of touch with what I actually wanted. And I think a lot of the time what I'd do if I wasn't on solitary retreat, in that moment, I'd probably pick up my phone. And it's like, there's some pleasure there, but it's not, it's because I haven't really worked out what I actually want but I'm grabbing at something that I kind of want. And we just sort of keep sort of shortchanging ourselves in that way. I think this kind of passivity is going to get worse and worse if we're not careful. I think this is the thing that I think is the real danger with AI. You spend a bit of time, if you get used to working with ChatGPT and other things like it, in a way it's great. And I think that there are sort of things, I think that there are ways of engaging with it that are probably quite positive. The danger, I think, is that we become passive now in relation to thinking about anything. The sense that I just won't think, I'll just ask the question and it will kind of work it all out for me quicker and possibly better than I kind of think I can. And like we'll just lose the capacity. If you don't use that capacity to think, you'll lose the ability to. And we'll become more and more put in the passive position where our thinking needs to be done for us. Our pleasure needs to come from outside of ourselves rather than out of the kind of fullness of our experience of being a human being. And so we sort of are put in a state where we're, for these various reasons, feeling alienated from the kind of experience of life that on a deep level we feel that we want, and then feeling like we deserve it being given it from the outside. We can pay for it, we can grab at it, we can find a quick way at it. So that's the conundrum that we can find ourselves in and can really infect the way that we relate to the spiritual life. And I'll say a little bit more about that. And we'll get to a more positive way of potentially relating to it a little bit later. There's a bit more to say in this vein. I think it's really important to kind of diagnose what's going on here because probably most of us will be affected by it to some extent. So let's pause there and we'll go next door for some tea and then I'll say more after we come back.
Press it.
Okay. All right. Are we back online as well? Good. Great. So, hopefully I didn't depress us all too much with the situation that we find ourselves in. But I think it's important to sort of know, to investigate, what it is that brings us to practicing the Dharma. What it is even that just leads us to be interested in working on our minds or moving towards a spiritual goal in that way. Actually, by the act of just really looking at that and getting to know that, might get us quite a lot further than some of the ways we might think of just getting going, running towards it. Really getting to know what's sort of underpinning it. What we can find that this same tendency to sort of expect and want experience as a kind of compensation for a sense of lack, we can end up bringing to our spiritual life. This sense that we can get on retreat of wanting to have an experience by the end of the retreat, particularly if it's a longer meditation retreat, feeling like I'll be sort of shortchanged in some way, or I'll have failed in some way, if I get to the end of the 10 days without having an experience, without having a sort of takeaway experience. It's very natural. I've done that, and lots of us sort of end up in that, engaging with it from that kind of framework. And it creates a lot of suffering that we don't need. I think this comes in our sort of, there's a lot of interest in sort of non-dual experience and ways of practicing that are sort of looking to get directly to the sort of the non-dual experience, and this sense that there's an experience out there to be had. There's something in these teachings by all means, but a tendency, I think, in the culture to pick up an app that will kind of lead you straight through to the non-dual experience without all the context and practice and the sort of complete sort of world in which that needs to emerge. Bhante talks about the difference between attainment and acquisition. So saying that, in a way, this sort of the attainment of enlightenment, the attainment of spiritual goals of various stages, is the result of the gradual extension of our own real being and consciousness into higher levels and new dimensions. Attainment is the result of the gradual extension of our own real being, as we actually are, and consciousness into higher levels and new dimensions. Whereas acquisition is the attempted appropriation of the higher level by and for ourselves as we at present are. Acquisition is the attempted appropriation of the higher level by and for ourselves as we at present are. So attainment is a sort of growing into something higher. Acquisition is a desire to have it, and pull it down to our level and grab the goodies. He describes the difference between being the sort of growth of a flower. So the sort of the seed is in the soil and it emerges and it's watered and the stem emerges and leaves emerge, and then ultimately what kind of comes out of that is the flowering of the plant. This beautiful flower might then sort of emerge from a bud at the end of that whole process as a sort of completion, as a part of that whole process. That would be attainment. Acquisition would be more like the plant's dead, so we stick on a kind of paper flower or a wax flower or someone else's flower onto it and sort of feel like, there, I've got the here's my flower. It's very, very tempting, particularly in a world where we're told that we can have everything really quickly, where everything can sort of be paid for, everything can be sort of delivered to us like the next day, or told to us immediately, or whatever it is, to sort of the sort of slow and gradual process of attainment can feel we can be less drawn to that than the possibility of acquiring something. And I think this can come into where I talked about non-dual, sort of interest in non-dual experience. I think another way that it can manifest in our spiritual journeys can be an interest in psychedelics as well. And I think that with psychedelics, there's I don't want to knock it completely, particularly because I think it can open quite a lot of people up to a spiritual life. So I know quite a lot of people who've come to practicing the Dharma because of a psychedelic experience that sort of showed them that there was more to consciousness than they realised, and then they got interested in following that up. And it seems that can be a way of sort of potentially breaking through in some sort of psychological disorders and so on. So I don't want to knock it. But once you're on a spiritual path, I'd really recommend avoiding it, because it's very much in this tendency of, there's an experience out there to be had that will be the thing, and it's something that I can take and I will have it. There we go. And Bhante talks about it as a smash and grab raid on the transcendental. It's like we can jump there, we can have the experience, and maybe you can. Maybe that is what is going on there. But then what do you do with that? And I've known people for whom that has been very demotivating for the slow, gradual work of growing the flower from the plant that we ultimately need to do if we're going to be transformed. This sense that all this meditation is nothing on that smash and grab raid that I had, and also it can, it lacks the context for that experience. If that experience hasn't grown out of something rich and full, then it's almost like it's too big for us potentially. It's like we've not got the sort of the breadth to be able to absorb and integrate it. So it's sort of divorced we've grabbed at something that's outside of ourselves, and now we're in relation to this thing that we don't have much of a connection to, if you know what I mean. Which can be quite demotivating, even sort of destabilizing potentially. So a word of warning on that front. So there are 3 particular syndromes that he says come out of this approach in terms of how we approach the spiritual life. He talks about this neurotic approach of the spiritual life is an experience that we can get from outside of ourselves. He says that experience is going to have to come from somewhere, from someone, or from something. Yeah. So we're looking outside of ourselves, outside of the sort of organic sort of growth into an experience. We're looking outside of ourselves somewhere, to someone or to something. And so this from somewhere becomes something that he terms pseudo-spiritual exoticism. Yeah, a nice big term. Pseudo-spiritual exoticism. So that's the sense that our spiritual experience should come from far away, from the distant, a distant country and a culture very unlike our own, even from outer space. That made me think of the fact that there are religions that are sort of founded on the idea of the teaching comes from aliens, and which can seem a bit silly if you're doing a satire of it or whatever, but it makes sense, doesn't it? We want something really, really far from us, and we sort of place it sort of over there, something in exotic sort of dress, and he points out this idea. We can have this idea. Again, the sort of East and West terminology is slightly sort of broken down, I think, in the last 50 years, or the way we've tended to use it. But this idea that the East and the sort of spiritual East is good and spiritual, and that the West is bad and sort of grossly materialist. And he's saying that he thinks that's a travesty of the facts. It's not as simple. It's not as simple as that. Particularly meeting a Buddhist, I found this, meeting a Buddhist context, walking through the doors of the London Buddhist Centre 11 years ago or so, as I did. I'd walked past the London Buddhist Centre, and I'd always imagined people in robes for ages. And I sort of, when I came in, partly, to be honest, I felt like, oh, it's okay. I wasn't particularly looking for people in robes at the time. And another part of me thought, oh, who are these guys? In their sort of normal clothes. With a sort of, some of them with a dress sense like maybe a few years behind others, or whatever it is. It just all felt a bit sort of normal. The benefit of that, I sort of realised, was that that's something I could do, and that's the danger of this approach, is that it's somewhere far away that I can therefore sort of keep a bit at arm's length. So the next syndrome is pseudo-spiritual projection. So this is the idea that our spiritual experience is going to come from someone. So we project that spirituality onto a guru figure of one sort or another. Yeah, and he's saying that the bigger the claim that the guru makes of their spiritual experience, whether that's at some big conference or on YouTube more and more or whatever it is, the bigger the claim that they make of their spiritual experience, the more people will tend to believe that, because there's this neurotic need to believe that we have this spiritual longing. I want to meet the person who's it. I want to meet. I want to sort of be in contact with them, with the real deal, and we're looking for the real deal. And the danger of that is that we sort of, if we get closer to whoever this real deal is, we're likely to be disappointed as well, or we're likely to see the sort of the more human aspects and then sort of want to rubbish that and then find another one. We want an ideal that we can't sort of find, or we're looking in the wrong place for. And the problem with all this is, again, our passivity. We want to be given a spiritual experience. We want to meet the person who's going to give it to us, rather than somebody. One thing that the Bhante says elsewhere is that most of us probably don't need to meet a Buddha. We probably wouldn't know what to do if we met a Buddha. Most of us, what we need is someone just slightly more developed than ourselves, who can be a friend, basically. Somebody who knows a little bit more of the path than us, who's able to sort of say, why don't you try and do this? Try and do that next thing, and actually do it, rather than needing to meet the perfect, completed individual who's going to give us everything all at once. Then lastly, pseudo-spiritual technism, which is a word that I didn't know. Pseudo-spiritual technism, which is a sort of, this is the idea that you'll get spiritual experience from something, from a particular technique or approach. There's the technique, there's the one that's going to be really, really, that's it. And the danger is then that kind of comes with a kind of dogmatism. It's like, you're not doing this practice, you're not doing the real thing. And the Buddhist tradition is full of different practices, and they all work they sort of work in different ways, and all of them will tend to kind of speak of the path as something complete. The idea being that you take up a practice, a way of practicing, and you follow it through. And there are numbers of these kind of sort of ways of explaining a path of practice, and most of them probably do work as a complete thing if you really engage with it and follow it through. But the danger is we want the right one, and we sort of then question whether we've got the right one or is the right one over there, etc. And I remember there's a meditation book that I sort of came across that was very technical, and I really I found it appealing, partly because it seemed to just be like, this is it. This is the whole path. You do that, then you do this, then you do that. And part of me was like, ooh, great. It was long, the book, and I never never actually did follow through all the exercises one after the other, but there was this sense that I could, that would be, if I do that, then that would be great, then I'll sort of get it, rather than the sort of the more real day-to-day thing of actually putting things into practice. So here at the Buddhist Centre, we're saying that to begin with, what we need to do is really work on mindfulness, integration, sort of integrating our experience, but bringing more awareness into our experience, and cultivating positive emotion. For a long time, that's what we really need to work on. There are points where there are ways that we sort of introduce sort of other aspects in, but they're really the emphasis for a long time, up until the point at which we're ordained within this tradition. At that point in a path of practice, it sort of expands somewhat, but you don't let go of those things. You keep doing those things. And it could seem a bit kind of unsexy when you think about, but what about diving straight into non-duality or whatever? It's like, well, most of this, we need something else before that. We need to really cultivate some qualities that will provide the basis for that. And if we can trust that, there's a complete path that comes out of that, and that will be enough. So yeah, pseudo-spiritual exoticism, pseudo-spiritual projection, and pseudo-spiritual technism. So yeah, maybe let's just pause for a moment and think, how do you think you relate to the goal? Let's get into pairs, ideally with someone you don't know that well. We'll get into pairs and we'll speak for a few minutes. How do you relate to the goal? Do you fall into any of these traps, do you think? And do you relate to it as experience? Are there other ways that you relate to it that might be more conducive? Or are there things here that you think that you sort of fall into? So yeah, let's get into pairs and we'll talk about that. How do you relate to the goal?
Sure. And neither does my partner, but I want to understand.
So, yeah, just thinking, how do you relate to what the goal of the spiritual life is? What do you think you relate to spirituality in some of the ways that I just mentioned, in terms of looking to get the experience from outside of yourself in some way, from someone, from somewhere, from something, and if not, how do you relate to it?
slowly getting challenged. There's no like
Let's have 1 more minute, so make sure you both have a chance to say something.
it was like talking to some random guy. We just did it for like ages. I've been talking to someone like the actual.
All right. So it'd be good to hear from a few of you. What do you? I'm not sure how clear my question was actually, in hindsight, but I'm sure you seem to have something to say. So what was? How do you relate to the goal, and do you recognise it in anything I've just said? Yeah. What resonates as true for you, or how do you notice that? Yeah.
One of the things I first shared was today I bought yet another spiritual book and definitely felt in the last few years that tension between wanting to acquire the spiritual insight and finally find a book that explains everything versus just being with the books that I bought maybe a long time ago and really embodying and attaining a new way of being and the movement within myself that comes from really kind of committing to and understanding what has been written. So I'm making a conscious effort to be at the moment with a very small selection of books, even though I have just bought that one. But I will spend the majority of my time with two at the moment.
Yeah, it's a good practice, isn't it? There's so much that we can read about the Dharma, and to some extent that's good, and it's good to be. Well, I think in a sense, all that we need to practice is very little. It could just be a couple of verses from a traditional text, or it could be one sort of, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or whatever. It could be that could be the whole thing. And in a certain sense, it might be better if it was something as simple as that, just so that we can make sure that our focus isn't on learning more, but is on really practicing the things that we know. There's a benefit for sort of learning, filling out our understanding of the Buddhist tradition, but I think more and more the benefit comes from our ability to then communicate more with others. It's like we need to find the teaching that we're like, oh yes, that's something I want to do, that's something I can sort of follow through with. And then the more we learn, the more we can kind of be in dialogue and, in a way, ultimately be able to help others to do the same. Understanding the complete tradition can then sort of benefit, that's where the main benefit of that sort of comes, yeah. What else? Yeah.
I was saying the second and third. I don't know what it was, but like the pseudo-spiritual thingies.
Projection
Yeah.
and technism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
both of those. Like I used to be super into non-duality, and I actually was practicing it, and actually got to these non-dual states, but then suddenly I'd be like, this is amazing, and then I go back to life, and I'm like, wow, life is still shit. and it kind of ruined it, and I just went back to normal, and I'm like, how do I get back? And then it just kept on like kind of flipping between those, and I'm like, wow, this is not even helping. It just makes me feel good for a while I'm in it, but then my life, it hasn't sorted out any of my life problems at all. And then with the projection thing, I just assumed that if someone's like reached these states, they've just like got life sorted out. And I once had this call with a really famous, like, this guy that wrote a really famous meditation book, and I thought he'd be like super enlightened because he talked about how like insane these states he's been in. And then when I was talking to him, I was like, wait a second, this is just some guy. And then I told him, like, mate, I thought you were like super enlightened, but you're just some guy. And he was like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm just a guy. And it kind of ruined my kind of view on enlightened people for a while. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. The there's something. Yeah. I was going to say something about the first thing you said, and I've forgotten what it is. Yeah. Good. Anyone else? Mind completely blank. I'll come back. What else? Yeah.
We were discussing like how we go through different phases, you know, like through like our life, or the experience where we are at, and then sometimes we go circle, and then we meet again these phases, and kind of like you were saying as well, like we try different things, and you know, because it's kind of actually the path is simple, but it's just very difficult to follow through in the way that we, like apparently, that is expected or that is taught. And so we just battle with the things, and we just, because not to be able to bear, that's why the Buddha said that patience is the highest asceticism. It's like, yeah, but until then we grow, we develop these qualities and these skills, and then we need some support, and we need to put our hope and faith in some different things, because we're gonna feel this emptiness, we're gonna feel this frustration, we're gonna feel these things that we fall out of, that make us fall off of the path. And so somehow this person, this place, this technique, they have this as like crutches, like they happens to be like, okay, there is maybe with, you know, just like to bring us back to balance, and it really does sometimes do that, or sometimes it makes us drifted away, and we kind of lose, you know, but then at some point we're gonna figure it out, oh, that was a trap, and then, you know, I've just start again, and it's part of the path. And I think I've really reflected on that, because for me, I've checked all of them, like I've experienced all of them at different phases, and I'm probably sure now I would do it again. And I think that there's maybe this acknowledgement that then there will be this trap, and I will fall into it. And maybe the only thing I can do is trying to learn a little bit more about these traps, like that, you know, I fall, you know, a bit more mindfully into them, that I can just get out of it a bit more quick.
Getting to know yourself in the process, and the way that you're relating to the spiritual life, and all of what you've just been describing, I think, is that it's the stuff of actually living it. It's the stuff of actually living these things out, which, you know, it is in a way comparatively easy to learn these ideas and be excited about them, and it's great to be, you know, to hear the Dharma, have a sense of there's something in this that's true. That should be exciting. We like that should be something that we sort of feel, you know, there's possibility in life to have, you know, to have experiences. We start meditating and we find that, you know, things can sort of open up and we can experience our mind very differently, and that's great. Where it gets difficult is that then really sort of having to follow through with that. The sort of the stuff of, well, what happens? How does that affect my relationships? How does that affect my ability to get up and meditate day after day? What happens with all the kind of, when that shows me sort of some of my more difficult emotions? I'm going to have to do something about that. That's where it gets properly challenging. It's the sort of, you have the experience, then how do you have that? How do you bring that into the rest of your life? The sort of the challenge of sort of transforming your life in the light of the things that we might have heard or even experienced. The other thing that the lecture is about is this idea of, so there's enlightenment as experience. We've been talking about that. Then there's enlightenment as non-experience, which is mysterious. So Bhante quotes the Dhammapada saying, which says, Nibbanam Paranang Sukham, which means Nibbana, enlightenment, is the highest bliss. Yeah? Nibbanam Paramang Sukham. Nirvana is the highest bliss. So worldly bliss, the way that we're used to, that our experience of pleasure, comes from the contact between our senses and an object of pleasure. Even if that is our sort of a mental object, our mind sense and an idea that's very appealing, or a nice, someone I live with has started baking bread in the mornings, and I sort of come up from after meditation and you can smell when there's a freshly baked loaf of bread, and it's like, ooh, there's a sort of pleasurable kind of experience that comes out of that. But he's saying this supreme bliss doesn't depend on any sense contact. So what would that be? A bliss that has nothing to do with my senses meeting something in the external world, that kind of that's sort of somehow beyond that. We also talk about enlightenment in terms of cessation of the known, the sort of ending of the kind of habitual reliance upon this kind of sense experience, so that something else can emerge. It's not saying that at enlightenment all of our senses stop firing, we have a big black empty space. It's not saying that. It's saying that there's another aspect that becomes dominant, that becomes the main aspect of our experience, that is somehow beyond sense experience, that's somehow beyond what we could possibly call, in our own terminology, experience. In a way, like nirvana, enlightenment, is the experience of what happens when you go beyond experience, to use a sort of suitable paradoxical expression. So that's great, and that is the kind of territory that we're pointing at. The problem with that is that we have no reference points. We don't, in a way, this is why the Buddha was very reticent to really say very much about what enlightenment was, because it's like we can only misunderstand it at the moment. We can point, we can use paradox, we can use images, we can say it's a little bit like that, but taken to times it by a million or whatever. We can only sort of point at it. So if we're going to relate to enlightenment as something other than an experience, we need something a little bit more down to earth than the experience that you'll have, which is when you stop experiencing. Because like, where do you get started with that in practice? So what he talks about three ideas. He talks about growth, work, and duty as a slightly more, perhaps, down to earth. I'll retract down to earth as a slightly more immediate way of relating to enlightenment. So we've talked a bit about growth already. We've talked about the image of a flower growing. This sort of it's a very, very traditional aspect of the Buddhist tradition. So the Buddha, when he very soon after he gained enlightenment, and he first had the thought of communicating his understanding to others, and seeing just how difficult that would be, just how subtle and how outside of the framework of our usual experience his experience was, seeing how difficult that would be to communicate, there was a sort of almost like a moment of doubt that was finally, when it was overcome with a vision, an image of a bed of lotuses. So a pond of lotuses, and an image that some of the lotuses were sort of in the mud at the bottom, some of them were sort of halfway up, and some of them were sort of open or close to opening. And this is an image of humanity. It's often, when we realise things, it is often with a sort of, an image is often what will come, especially a creative idea. It's like it forms because of some sort of connection or some sort of image. So I like to think this is very much what the Buddha, this is a moment in the Buddha's mind where the prospect of communicating the Dharma was met with an image of a bed of lotuses. And this sense that human beings are at different stages of development, and there is the potential of this organic growth into enlightenment. The benefit of this metaphor of growth is that it isn't just something that comes at the end. It's not just the experience that you get at the end of the path. It's something that's happening throughout. So it's something that we can always relate to and engage with. It overcomes what Tom was saying about this idea that, enlightenment's so far away, I could never quite get there. That's very common, isn't it? We start to study this and you think, God, that's so, little old me, I might as well not bother, almost. But once you start getting a feel for growth, you can have the sense, and probably many of you will have this, that, I started meditating, I started practicing, and now I feel a bit different. My life's a bit different to when it was then. And then you keep going for a while, and then you're like, and now it's a little bit different still. And this sense of, there's a trajectory in this direction. I don't know what this thing is exactly that I'm aiming at, but it seems to be the right direction. And the steps that I take in that direction seem to be worthwhile in themselves. So we can engage with the moving along the path almost as an end in itself. Yeah, we're keeping on going, but we sort of, the more we move down that trajectory, I think the less important it becomes of when am I going to get there, because every step of the way is worthwhile. The other thing to do with the image of a plant is that it's very clear that a plant is an organic process that emerges in dependence on conditions. So it needs good soil, it needs water, it needs sunlight, it needs space to grow, it needs all of these things that together enable the emergence ultimately of the flower. So what that's pointing at is beyond just an experience that we can have. It's pointing at a context for growth. Growth needs a full context. It needs our sort of spiritual life needs to be completely embedded and in a way inseparable from our whole life, from how we think about meaning, from how we relate to people, from what we do, from the sort of rhythms and routines of our life, from the way that we think about what's right and wrong, and the way that we sort of govern ourselves, to the way that we sort of set up institutions, to the way that all of this, in a way, we need to kind of reverse this trend that happened at the Reformation that has become, that's not just affected the Christian faith, but has affected the whole shape of our world and the way that we relate to it. We need to reverse that and bring the kind of spiritual dimension back into every aspect of life. It's very difficult, and in a way this is what we're trying to do here. We're not, the UK is not a Buddhist culture in itself, and yet the Dharma is universal and we can practice it. In order to practice it in a fulsome way, we need to sort of create the culture around us in which we can live that out, and as much as possible spend time there in like the sort of, it's like in the right soil, if you know what I mean, so that these qualities can emerge because they're being encouraged. They're in a culture that's encouraging them. So then also, so that's growth. We could relate to enlightenment as work. Work and it's maybe slightly less appealing, but we could think of enlightenment in terms of work. So work not in terms of employment or sort of getting for pay or whatever, but the sense of the Bhante talks about it as the productive expenditure of energy. The sense that work ultimately is something that should be very, very positive. The sense that it's what we spend most of our time doing. It's the sense that we sort of we've got all this energy and this time while we're alive, and we try and sort of do something with it. We try and make things happen. We try and bring things into being. And that could be shareholder value for something we don't particularly care about, or it could be something that we really want to bring into being that feels motivating, that we can feel behind. Through this work, you grow. It's like through applying yourself towards a particular aim, growth kind of happens. And that can, this work could well be volunteering. It could well be creative projects. It could well be. It doesn't necessarily need to be your job, but it does help if it is, especially if what your job is kind of pulling in the opposite direction at present. I've worked here at the London Buddhist Centre in the team here for about 8 or so years now, and that's definitely been where I've grown the most. Is the sense that being brought up against, I'm trying to do something, I'm applying myself, I'm putting my energies into something, and then I meet my limitations. And that's sort of humiliating, sometimes very humiliating. And that's really good. In doing so, I've sort of got to know, this is what I need to work on. This is the thing that's holding me back. And by bumping into it again and again, then there's the possibility of sort of transcending it, especially because I'm in a context where there are others who are trying to do the same, and there's a sort of supportive atmosphere to that. Can we find a way for more of what our energy is put into to be enabling us to grow in this way and supporting us and sort of in line with that? This is the opposite. It's sort of the opposite to the passive craving for experience, isn't it? That's wanting something out here. This is us using our energy towards something. It's the flipping of it around. Does that make sense? So again, this needs context. Ideally, our energy is going into a context that we believe in. Ideally, and this is Bhante's vision, really, is that ideally that's going into creating this Buddhist culture, to creating Sangha, to creating community based on these values, and the institutions of that. People who work, we've got the team who work together in the cafe next door, just making food and washing up and so on. But in order to partly do a part of creating a context in which Buddhist values are around you and lived out. And whatever that may be, just the sense that we're moving towards a really meaningful goal, and and our energy can be channeled towards something. And all the better if we can do that alongside other people. It's going to be hard to sustain by ourselves, and there's just much more we can do together. And then duty. Perhaps even more of a dirty word. I can worry about feeling dutiful, and I'm doing things because I sort of have to rather than want to. There's a very positive way of relating to this. There's a sense that the duty is a sense that there's a calling on us. Our work is being motivated by a sense of our kind of right place in things, of a sense of what our life is for and should be contributing to. Bhante says that one's only duty is to work in the way that we just described. One's only duty is to work, to do whatever one can reasonably be, or in some cases unreasonably, expected of one in a situation in which one actually is. So we find ourselves in a situation that demands something of us. If that situation and the demands that it's calling on us are close to our heart, are close to the thing that we want our life to be about, then it will call something from us. even something unreasonable, even something more than we can at present do. It will call on that from us. In doing so, we sort of learn, we sort of test our mettle. We sort of find out what's in us. The ultimate sort of, in a way, the highest ideal that sort of, I think the way that the Buddhism most sort of sublimely communicates its ideal is the ideal of the Bodhisattva, of one who is aiming to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all. So the goal is for everyone, not just for me, but for everyone to be enlightened. What would that be? What would it? I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine, but it's like the right direction of travel. The sense of like, I'm not just trying to grow for myself. I want to live in a world where others are doing the same. I want to live in a world where the values that I intuit and want to experience is being fully lived out around me. And that is really difficult to do. That's a very, very high ideal. And yet, if one's productive energy is moving in that direction, if that's being called on from us, then so much the better. It's a sense that we're, rather than trying to have an experience or get somewhere, it's more like we flip it over, and it's like we're giving our life to something, so that and this is relevant. If what we're trying to do is go beyond the self, or go beyond the kind of the grasping ego sense that wants an experience or wants to wants satisfaction or something, if we're trying to go beyond that, then we need, then we're not going to get there for ourselves. It's like we need to turn that upside down. We need to have a sense that our life is sort of, in a way, that sort of ego center is almost dissolving out into something. That our life is being submerged in something of value, so that the boundaries of me and my valuable bit stop mattering. And almost without noticing, we'll find that we've become bigger, that our consciousness has expanded. And and then, if we're relating to enlightenment in this way, if we're relating to it as something that it's a process that we're growing within, that we're putting our energies into, rather than just trying to be given something, and that we're enabling ourselves to be, to find ourselves in a relationship of duty, because the ideal means so much to us that we feel like we actually have to respond to it, that we have to respond to it for ourselves and for other people. And then, in following that process through, chances are, along the way, we will have spiritual experiences. And when they come, they're like a gift. They're not something that we can go out and get. It just doesn't work like that. It's a contradiction in terms. When it happens, it will be as a result of these conditions that we're setting up. It'll come completely out of the blue. It'll be as though it's come from a completely different dimension. We won't be able to find our way back to it. Probably the other spiritual experiences we have in our life, if we have multiple, will be of completely different natures. And you sort of can't do anything with it. In a way, it's just saying, good, you're on the right track. Remember it, cherish it. It's important. They're not that these. It's not that it's unimportant. It's just that it's the wrong thing to be pointing ourselves at. Okay, so let's leave it there. What we could do in a second, we'll put our mats and cushions away, and if you can, I'd encourage you to give and support the centre. In fact, in line with everything I've been saying, I'd really encourage you to just support what we're doing here in any way you can, whether that's through putting something in the dana bowl as you come, or various different ways that you can kind of join in. We sometimes use the language of getting more involved. We sometimes talk about going deeper, which I think is the language of experience, and sometimes we use the language of getting more involved, and I think that's a bit more like it. actually taking one's practice further in this kind of context means finding ways of joining in and contributing, and in the process getting to know others and starting to get into this sort of dynamic relationship with a culture in which we can grow. So yeah, I'd really encourage you to find various ways of doing that, and you could talk to me or any of the other team if you want to know more about how to do that. So yeah, let's leave it there for now. Legs come to sleep and then feel it.